everybody, my name is Bethan. I'm one of the practitioners at Valley Steps, and I'm joined today by Laura, who is from Mind Nourishing. Hello, Laura.
Hello.
Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about Mind Nourishing and kind of the things that you do, the work you do?
Yeah, so I'm a nutritional therapist, and Mind Nourishing is my business, which is all about basically inspiring people to make small changes to their diet to be able to create large, lifelong changes to their health and their happiness. So yeah, I set up my business about 2 years ago. And the reason why I set it up really was that I'd already done my undergrad in exercise, nutrition and health. And then I started working in the Valley. So I was working originally in like Aberdare and Mardy for a housing association, getting people more active and eating better. And I found a lot of people, they were really limited in the amount of like what food they could eat. So they weren't eating much fresh fruit and vegetables. And at the same time, they really struggled with their mental health. So they were struggling to go out the house, anxiety levels are really high. And it just really sparked an interest in me about how these two things could be connected and how the foods we eat could actually potentially impact our mood. So I went back to uni, did my master's in nutritional therapy, and then thought, right, I'm going to set up my business and hopefully inspire some people to think about how food can affect their mood.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing, because I think it's one of those things that we often just don't really think about. Like when we talk about mental health and well-being and mood, we talk a lot about the body in terms of like exercise, how to relax, how to breathe, but people quite often don't think about the food they eat and how that might impact upon them as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what inspired me as well was that because of my knowledge, like in uni and things, I'd changed my diet and I was making sure that I was eating a really like colourful diet and lots of variety. And it made me feel really, really good. And I was aware that the days that I didn't do that, I felt a bit sluggish and maybe I didn't feel like I was quite like myself. And I was just really worried that there might be some people that would never experience this kind of like feeling of feeling truly like well and truly energetic. And yeah, like I definitely notice in myself what I'm eating and how that affects me. So yeah, I think it's so important that we start to learn the types of things that can help us.
Yeah, definitely. So when we were emailing back and forth about different ideas, stuff that we could talk about today, you mentioned something called gut microbiome. Did I say that right?
Yes, that's the one.
So what is that?
Yeah, so the gut microbiome, so we're learning loads more about it all the time, and it's one of these things that probably over the next few years, it's just going to be in the media basically all the time. But what it is, it's that we've got trillions of different like bacteria, yeasts and parasites all living within our gut, but across our body, but the majority of them are within our gut in our large intestine. And what we're starting to find out that these gut microbiome, the gut bacteria is involved in so many different things. So obviously it's involved in digestion and being able to kind of get the energy out of our foods. But now we also know that it's involved in like our immune system. So like 70% of our immune system is in our gut, and it's involved with lots of that. It's also involved with like our metabolism, like how much fat we store in our body. And what really interested me when I started to learn about it was that we've actually got more bacteria cells in our body than human cells. So basically, we are pretty much more bacteria than humans. So they just have such a huge impact on us. So I just find it really, really interesting.
That's really interesting, like that we have more bacteria cells in us than human cells. Like, because you don't tend to walk around during the day thinking about, when we think about bacteria, you think of it as being like germs outside of you. Like we don't really tend to think of it as being something that like lives in us, you know?
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think quite often when we think about bacteria, we think about maybe like the bad bacteria, that the pathogenic bacteria that makes us sick, makes us feel ill. But actually we've got so many like good bacteria that we wouldn't be able to survive without them. Like we need, obviously they live on us, but we need them as much as they need us. And we also know that they can have a huge impact as well with things to do with our hormones and things like neurotransmitters, which I find really, really interesting.
Yeah, so like neurotransmitters is probably more of what I'm obviously kind of aware of. Yeah, in terms of like sort of psychology and neuropsychology, we talk a lot about neurotransmitters and their kind of role in mood. And like one of the big ones that we talk about a lot is serotonin, because obviously serotonin we think is largely responsible for sort of stabilizing mood, amongst other things. And, you know, some theories of depression will say that, you know, it is associated with, you know, a lack of serotonin or kind of not enough serotonin. So does that play a role in the sort of gut microbiome?
Yeah, so they're now finding that there's a variety of different neurotransmitters that are actually created in the gut. So the 90% of serotonin is actually created in the gut. And they're starting, you might have heard the term kind of like the second brain, because they're thinking of the gut as our kind of second brain, because it actually does communicate with us and it affects how we our behavior. So there's like trillions of different or billions of different neurons in our gut, and we know that actually our gut can talk to our brain. And people might have experienced this in situations maybe when they've had butterflies or something like that. Like that is kind of a sign that your tummy is talking to your brain, and that your brain can, your gut can communicate with your brain. So yeah, so a large proportion of our serotonin is created in the gut. But we've got other kind of neurotransmitters that they found are created in the gut as well. So things like GABA, which is like a hormone neurotransmitter that really helps to calm us and to make us feel nice and relaxed. And also dopamine, that the feeling when you get like that reward feeling. So maybe when you've had like a really lovely cup of coffee that you enjoyed, or you've bought yourself a nice bag or something like that, you get that like surge of really nice feeling. That's another kind of neurotransmitter that's created in the gut. So again, like these are things that I just didn't have any idea about. Like I thought our gut was for digesting our food. I didn't really think about all of the different things that it's involved with, but I think it makes it even more clear about how the foods we eat every day can have such an impact on not just what nutrients we're getting, but literally our whole body is kind of influenced by our gut.
Yeah, like I find it fascinating because like I spent 3 years studying psychology, 2 years studying clinical psychology, and I did countless modules in neuropsychology. You know, I was talking about serotonin in my sleep by the end of my master's, and I don't think I ever heard anything about the amount of it being produced in the gut at all. Like I've heard about that second brain concept that you were talking about, but didn't realize quite how big that is in reality, like how much. But it kind of makes sense, like you were saying, you know, we notice when people experience like stress or anxiety or things like that, they quite often get those feelings in their tummy, like that, like the butterflies or the kind of nervousness or the nausea, like there's a feeling that is always there, isn't there, you know?
That gut feeling, yeah,
that gut feeling. So it kind of makes sense that it would be communicating with the brain. It's just I find it really interesting, just because, like I said, I've spent years studying all these neurotransmitters, particularly dopamine as well is another one that, you know, the kind of pleasure neurotransmitter that we talk about a lot. And again, it makes sense that that would be in our gut, because, you know, people quite often get that reward feeling from like eating something that they like, or, you know, like you say, having a nice coffee. You get that kind of nice rush of dopamine.
Good feeling,
like that nice warm kind of pleasure feeling.
But I think these are the things that it's only new science, so they're only just learning about it, and I think there's probably loads more that we don't know still. So there's still that kind of sense of mystery with it all.
I think that's probably true. Like if this is going to be like the second brain, it's probably the same as the first brain, in the sense that we're still every single day learning new things about the brain and how it functions, and even some of these neurotransmitters like serotonin. We've always thought that it kind of stabilizes mood, but we're always discovering even more. Like it plays a role in sleep, it plays a role in so much else. So yeah, I think it's quite exciting new science, and that it's probably going to keep going. With
I think so. Yeah, we'll be hearing a lot more about the microbiome, I'm sure.
Yeah. So you mentioned that there are like different foods that can kind of improve our gut microbiome. So what kind of foods would you kind of recommend there?
Yeah, so for everything to be functioning well, so for us to feel like we've got good energy, for our metabolism to be working, for these neurotransmitters to be created, we want to make sure that we've got enough of the good gut bacteria. So basically the way that we can kind of feed the good guys is through our food, because obviously what we eat, they eat generally. But the kind of macronutrient in particular, which is really important when it comes to the gut, is fiber. Because basically what happens with fiber, as humans, we eat it, but we don't digest it. It kind of goes into our gut, and it's used as fuel by our gut microbiome. So we know in general that as a population, we don't eat enough fiber. So it's recommended we have about 30 grams a day, but generally people only really get about 19 grams. So we want to be making sure that we can kind of increase our fiber any way we can. So that would be through kind of fruits and vegetables. It's kind of looking for those whole grain varieties. So kind of simple swaps, like swapping your like white pastas to your brown pastas, white rice to brown rice, white bread to brown bread. Like, it doesn't have to be huge changes, but it's looking to slowly increase your fiber intake. If you wanted to be a little bit more adventurous, there's also things like fermented foods you can try. So in kind of some health food stores, you might be able to see kind of like sauerkraut, or there's drinks like kefir that you can drink. They can be quite expensive, and they are generally quite easy to make at home if you are quite adventurous, but it does mean that you're fermenting cabbage in your side room, so it might not be your kind of thing. But these kind of things, like by having fiber and having these like fermented foods which are filled with these good gut bacteria that you kind of take on, it's a really good way of making sure you've got lots of healthy good gut bacteria, and it also helps to kind of slow down the growth of the bad bacteria as well. So generally it's kind of goes back to basics a lot of the time, to make sure you've got lots of colour coming in with different varieties of fruits and vegetables, because different types will have different types of fibre, which will feed different types of your bacteria. And what we do know is that the healthiest people on the planet have got the most diverse gut bacteria. So ideally you don't want to be eating the same foods every day, because that means you're going to just be feeding the same bacteria. You want to be mixing it up, getting the different colours, getting in the different fruits and veg, just so that you've got a huge variety to help you kind of complete all of these different functions in your body.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. Like back in January, had a bit of a New Year's resolution that I was gonna try and get more fibre, and that's all I did was switch, from like white pasta to brown pasta, white bread to brown bread. And I actually found I was like bloating a lot less than usual as well. Like it felt a lot more comfortable, like swapping to the brown stuff instead of having the white stuff all the time.
Yeah, definitely. And some people, they might find that initially, like when they are increasing their fibre, they might feel a little bit more bloated first of all, because you're kind of increasing the gut bacteria, and they're kind of learning what all this fibre is. So they're not kind of straight to it. They need to learn how to function as well. So sometimes people might feel a little bit more bloated before they start to improve, but just know that the kind of long-term effects of having an increase in your fibre is huge in terms of your overall health.
Yeah, and I think the colourful plate thing is a really good thing. Like I really like it if I make a meal and I look at it before I eat it and there's just like a rainbow of colours. Like, I don't know, something about that. I just really like the look of food when it has that kind of rainbow in it.
Yeah, definitely. And I kind of spoke about the variety of foods for different types of fibre. But also we know that the different colours have different protective elements on our body. So for example, like we call them phytonutrients. So it's basically the property that the plant has. That phytonutrient is there to protect the plant. So when we eat that plant, we're taking on that protective quality. And different colours have different phytonutrients. So if we can make sure we have kind of like, if we're having pepper, if we have a bit of the red, yellow and green, we're getting 3 different types of these kind of different types of protective nutrients. So yeah, it looks amazing on your plate, it looks more appealing, and actually you're just giving yourself all of these different nutrients to be able to make you feel better as well.
Yeah. So obviously one thing that we want to talk about a little bit is stress. So you know, we know because of our work in Valley Steps, the stress can have a huge impact, not just on people's kind of mental health, but their physical health as well, the way their body functions. So is there a link between stress and the gut microbiome? Like, does stress have an impact on that?
Definitely. So I know in your courses and things like that, you talk about the kind of the fight or flight response. And basically what we know during this response is that our blood is directed to like our vital organs for us to be able to respond to that threat. So it moves to our heart and our lungs because we might need to run quickly. Our blood moves to our arms and our legs to be able to move our muscles. But during this time, it doesn't prioritize digestion because that isn't a life or death kind of thing in that moment. So what happens is that, first of all, we're not digesting our food properly. And it can mean that kind of food can sit in our gut for a little bit longer, or it just isn't fully digested. So we can get those issues with IBS or kind of bloating and things like that. But another thing that happens is because the blood isn't going to our gut, it means that it's not getting all of this fresh oxygen to help heal and repair the gut. So if we are stressed for long periods of time, we can't go through that healing process. So again, sometimes we don't know what came first, whether it was kind of the lowering of the gut bacteria or kind of mental health issues. But what we do know is that people who are depressed generally have a less diverse gut bacteria. So we don't know what came first, but generally that's what we see in people. And it could be that potentially kind of like these stress hormones are have an effect on our diversity, and potentially even that we're just not being able to get all of those lovely nutrients from our food to be able to fuel our gut bacteria because we're not digesting properly. So yeah, so stress, and when I'm working with my clients, stress is one of the main things that we always look to target because it impacts everything. So it obviously impacts our sleep if we're stressed, and then if we're not sleeping enough, that impacts the kind of foods that we're craving, because when we lack energy, we crave more refined sugary foods that kind of up our energy really quickly. So yeah, so I always look to do things like recommend things like mindfulness or long walks outside, or anything that individual can do to really just lower their stress levels, even if it is just taking a few deep breaths, like when they are feeling stressed, just to try and help them switch from that stress response to that more kind of relaxation repair kind of phase that we need to help to repair our gut and to heal our digestion.
Yeah, so it's really interesting, isn't it? Because I mean, we, like you say, we talk a lot about fight or flight, and we talk about the fact that when we're in that, obviously our digestion slows down. Like I said, if I was running away from a bear, I really don't need to digest my last meal to survive. You know, I need
however lovely and yummy it was, you're not bothered.
I just need to get out of that situation. So you can see why the brain does that, to kind of save that energy and put that into me getting out of that situation. But you know, we talk a lot about the fact that there's a lot of evidence, there's a lot of theory that suggests that fight or flight wasn't really supposed to be on all the time. You know, like it was there to help us deal with these physical dangers back in like caveman times and times where we needed that. But, you know, the threats are different now, and people can be kind of in that fight or flight with that activated for a lot longer than they used to. And like you said, over time, that can have a lot of an impact. Again, not just on our mental health, but like our physical health and well-being as well.
Yeah, like I think when we are in those like life or death situations, it's obviously the most amazing response our body can have because it helps save our life. But yeah, the day-to-day kind of stresses with not getting enough likes on social media or getting an email which you don't really like the undertone to is not life or death. But yeah, our body can't really distinguish between that kind of stress. So yeah, it's I think that's potentially why we're seeing so many people these days who have issues with things like IBS or have kind of ongoing gut issues, because our body hasn't adapted to be able to deal with this stress, which is really long term.
Yeah, it is interesting as well because, like you're saying, I think there is a lot around kind of like food choices. Like you're saying, if people are tired, we tend to crave the refined sugars. And like I know if I'm stressed, I just want to comfort eat. Like I want carbs and I want fat, and like I just want to eat like a massive takeaway or loads of chocolate. Or so like I think when we're stressed, the stuff we crave and the choices we make are different as well. To like maybe when we're in a bit of a better place and we're feeling a bit more relaxed, we kind of make those different choices about our food.
Yeah, definitely. And especially during this kind of time where people are generally quite stressed, what I'm trying to get over to the people that I work with is that sometimes it's okay that if you want to use food as a comfort, so we know that some kind of foods like carbohydrates do help increase our serotonin levels because they make us feel good and we like them, and that's absolutely fine. Like it's not about beating yourself up, but it's also making sure that you have got other things within your toolbox, and things that you talk about all the time, Beth, about making sure that you don't just rely on one thing to help to manage your stress. It's having a few different things that you can tap into, and I think this kind of period of time is really good to try and figure out what works for you. So for me, like I've this last week I've been doing a jigsaw. Like I can't even remember the last time I've done one, but the thought of sitting down and really focusing on what I was doing, like you forget about everything else that's going on, and it just really helped to just calm and like focus my mind, calm myself. So yeah, it's just spending that time to find what helps to relax you.
Yeah, I think like I say, that is really important at the moment, in the sense that that is a positive spin on it. Like the fact that we have all got more time now kind of gives us that opportunity to really reflect on what helps us, what helps me deal with this stress. And maybe after this, people will have that toolbox of stuff they can use. And like you said, with managing stress, it's about having that full kind of toolbox. Like we're not just relying on one thing to kind of get us through. We talk about loads of stuff on our courses, don't we? Like we talk about food a little bit, things like alcohol, caffeine, like over relying on stuff. It's just about having that kind of full toolbox. And yeah, hopefully people come out of this situation maybe starting to understand what helps them a little bit more.
Yeah, we'll take all of the positives we can at this time. So yeah, we'll take that as a positive.
Absolutely. Oh, thank you, Laura. It's been lovely to chat with you, and like really informative, because like I didn't know anything about gut microbiome and nothing about neurotransmitters being in the gut. So that's been really helpful even for me. So thank you very much for
thank you. Yeah, and I hope people find it useful.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you, Laura.
No, thank you, Beth.